It's time to go and blow out the Blues again in St. Louis.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now your number one sports podcasting network where we bring you your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. On today's episode, I'll preview the matchup between the Blackhawks and the Blues out in St. Louis. And then for segments 2 and 3, it's part 2 of Deep Dive 3.0, where I'll go through some team statistics as well as the stats and analytics for every Blackhawks defenseman through the opening 30 games this season. But first, have to let you all know that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, happy Friday, Blackhawks fans. For the second time this season, the Blackhawks are out in St. Louis taking on the Blues in this Friday night matchup. The last two meetings between these two teams this season will come at the United Center. Puck drop tonight out in St. Louis at 7 p.m. Central Time, with the game being televised on ESPN Plus, by the way. So for anyone out there who doesn't have CHSN or has been streaming Blackhawks games on the regular so far this year, there's another avenue for you at least to potentially watch the game here tonight. In the first meeting between the Blackhawks and Blues, I'm sure you all remember pretty darn well. That was a dominant 8-3 win in St. Louis back on October 15th. Truly one of the most fun Blackhawks games I've watched since I've been the host of the show. Lukas Reichel was named the number one star of the game when he was still a member of the Blackhawks, would go on to be traded just like a week later. He had 2 goals and assists in that game. Connor Bedard had 3 helpers. Frank Nazar scored a beautiful goal. It was a lot of fun watching the Blackhawks throttle the Blues in their own building. And I feel like the Hawks have a pretty good opportunity to go and get another road win over St. Louis here tonight, as the Blues are struggling coming into this one. First off, they're 11-14-7 on the season, so they've lost 21 of their opening 32 games, and that currently has them fourth to last out in the Western Conference with just 29 points. And then so far in December, they're 2-4 in their 6 games, including an ugly 7-2 loss last night against the Predators out in Nashville. So this is actually the back end of a back-to-back for St. Louis. Didn't have, too dreadful of a travel or anything going from going from Nashville to St. Louis, but still, the Blackhawks should have the advantage in terms of the legs in the front end of their back-to-back, as, of course, they'll be back in action tomorrow at the United Center against the Detroit Red Wings. And back-to-backs, we know, haven't been all that great for the Blackhawks so far this season. They're 0-4 in their 2 sets, with a 3-2 loss to the Seattle Kraken, a 9-3 loss to the Buffalo Sabres, a 6-1 loss to the Los Angeles Kings, and then on Sunday, the worst performance of the season in a 7-1 loss to the Anaheim Ducks. So yeah, definitely hasn't been pretty, but a great opportunity to start off this back-to-back this weekend here on a great note, as the Blues, coming off of an awful showing last night, I'm sure they're not all that encouraged heading into this meeting. So I do like the Blackhawks' chances of picking up a second straight win in St. Louis to open up this season series. As far as the Blackhawks' projected lineup goes for tonight, I am recording this prior to the morning skate. However, considering they're coming off of one of their best showings of the season in that 3-0 win over the New York Rangers on Tuesday, I don't really see any need to go and change up the lineup whatsoever, especially after they only have 19 healthy skaters on the NHL roster currently, following Sam Rinzel and Landon Slaggert being reassigned to the AHL on Monday. So I think, it's going to be the same as we saw last time out for the Blackhawks. Ryan Green, Connor Bedard, and Andrei Burakovsky as the top line. And I thought they had a really great showing from start to finish. I mentioned in yesterday's recap show, Connor Bedard and Andrei Burakovsky both had point-blank opportunities in the first period to put the Blackhawks ahead. Igor Shesterkin just made a couple of marvelous saves But then, of course, Burakovsky went on to set up Bedard for the Hawks' second goal of the game in the second period. And then Tyler Bertuzzi was actually out on the ice with Bedard and Ryan Green for a shift. That led to the third goal of the game, Bertuzzi's 16th tally of the season. So a really active game from the Blackhawks top line. Hopefully they'll be able to keep that up in enemy territory this evening. As far as the second line goes, Tyler Bertuzzi, Oliver Moore, and then Frank Nazar in the middle. I thought it was also a pretty notable game from the Blackhawks second line, even though they technically didn't wind up on the score sheet because, as I just mentioned, Bertuzzi was on the ice with Bedard and Green for that goal. But I did think the Blackhawks top six in general, those two forward lines, were the best in that game against the Rangers. And Frank Nazar, well, he unfortunately, fumbled that breakaway chance that he had late in the third period. Would have been a great opportunity for him to snap his 17-game goal drought, but it's now reached 18 games since he's last found the back of the net. That came all the way back on October 28th, prior to Halloween, not even before Thanksgiving, all the way back before Halloween. But I did agree with Blashill's comments on Nazar regarding how he played in that game on Tuesday, and also how he's been playing for the last couple of weeks. He has definitely been more noticeable, using his speed more frequently, and we saw that 3 or 4 times, I thought, against the Rangers. And when going through the stats and the analytics for all the forwards in part 1 of Deep Dive 3.0 on yesterday's show, I mentioned that while it has been relatively quiet and certainly not as noticeable last month or so for Nazar compared to how he started the season, he's still third on the Blackhawks in scoring, and that's coming while he doesn't have a goal in nearly 2 months now. He's also shooting 8.8%, which I think is likely going to be below his career average with the way that he can shoot the puck. Even though he has had some finishing problems in the NHL, I do feel like that's something eventually he's going to figure out. So while it sucks that Frankie is in this scoring drought, I am encouraged by the way he's still playing, especially as he's gotten healthier over these last couple of weeks. And honestly, Blackhawks fans, I wouldn't be surprised to see that goal drought end here tonight in St. Louis. As I mentioned, scored in the first meeting between these teams at Enterprise Center back in mid-October. Third line for the Blackhawks, Teuvo Teravainen, Jason Dickinson, Ilya Mikheyev. Real strong defensive third line there for the Blackhawks. I do wonder at some point in time, I've mentioned I feel like Ryan Donato is a better fit for that checking line than Teuvo Teravainen is. However, I don't know if Teuvo necessarily fits as well down on the fourth line with guys like Colton Dach and Sam Lafferty. But I do feel altogether, and let me know in the comment section if you feel the same way, I just feel like with Donato being a little bit more of a physical presence out there, as well as someone who likes to shoot the puck, whereas Teuvo Teravainen is a pass-first player and is a little bit passive out there in terms of like board battles and physicality. Still a very responsible defensive player, and there's a reason he plays on the penalty kill so often for the Blackhawks. But still, I do feel like Donato's a better fit there and provides a little bit more goal scoring that can help that line be a bit more opportunistic offensively when they do get those chances in the offensive zone. But maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit there. And then on the fourth line, that leaves Colton Dach, Ryan Donato, and Sam Lafferty, who now is looking like a lineup regular here in Chicago, which I'm sure he has to be happy about considering there's only 6 defensemen currently on the NHL roster. And then that leaves Dominic Toninato, the man who was recalled from Rockford on Tuesday, which I thought was the right call from the Blackhawks to bring up a veteran forward who doesn't have to be playing on a nightly basis, can be in that 13th forward role, and you're not going to feel too horrible about it from an organizational standpoint. Maybe Toninato makes his Blackhawks debut up in the NHL as he's been with the Ice Hogs up to this point in time. Maybe that comes tomorrow night in the back end of this back-to-back. Maybe they give Lafferty a night off or Colton Dach or someone, not exactly sure who, but there is a chance I think Dominic Toninato draws in for one of these 2 games in this weekend back-to-back. And then defensively, Blashill changed up the defensive pairings for really the first time this season, and I don't know if that was truly, the difference maker. I think altogether the Blackhawks just were much better defensively as a team against the Rangers, but one of their better defensive efforts of the entire season, holding New York to only 21 shots, which ties the lowest that the Blackhawks have allowed in a game so far this season. So no need to go and change things up there. Alex Vlasic and Louis Crevier as the top pairing that play in a lot of defensive situations. Wyatt Kaiser and Connor Murphy also more leaned on in the defensive zone as well. And that leaves Matt Grzelcyk and Artem Levshinov to play a lot in the offensive zone, the two best puck movers probably for the Blackhawks right now on their blue line, along with maybe Wyatt Kaiser, although we haven't seen that too frequently from him so far this season. And then in goal, I'm going to guess it's going to be Spencer Knight here, Blackhawks fans. However, Arvid Soderblom was the one that got the start in St. Louis back on October 15th. Went pretty good for him, obviously. But the one thing I do think about is Soderblom had an even better performance in the first matchup of the year against the Red Wings, who the Blackhawks are playing tomorrow night. He stopped 45 of 46 shots to pick up the win against his brother Elmer and Detroit in mid-November. But what I will say is Soderblom has started the back end of both back-to-backs for the Blackhawks so far this year, and obviously that's been a nightmare. 9-3 loss to Buffalo, 7-1 loss to Anaheim. I don't think either were necessarily his fault, but maybe Jeff Blashill just kind of wants to change up the mojo there. So not exactly sure who's going to be in between the pipes tonight in St. Louis. I could kind of see it going either way. I'm going to guess Spencer Knight right here, right now, though, considering he's coming off of a shutout and considering the way that Arvid Soderblom played against the Red Wings in the first meeting. And then real quick, getting into some keys to victory for the Blackhawks. Number one for me tonight is to get shots on goal early and often. Play with that aggressive mentality in the offensive zone. I think that's kind of gotten away from the Hawks in their last couple of games, but prior to that, there was like a 4 or 5 game stretch where they had really done a nice job. And Blashill talked about wanting them to shoot the puck more in the offensive zone. They responded really nicely in the couple of games after that. I think it's kind of gotten away from them here as of late. And the reason I bring this up is because Jordan Binnington has been getting pulled left and right by Jim Montgomery this year. And a couple of them he hasn't been very happy about. Don't think he could dispute why he was pulled last night, though, in Nashville, as he gave up 6 goals. Joel Hofer had to come into the game, so not entirely sure which of those two is going to get the start for the Blues tonight, but whoever it is, neither have been very good. The Blues have gotten some of the worst goaltending in the league this year. Jordan Binnington has an .869 save percentage. He's, involved in some trade discussions possibly, as well as a lot of the members of the St. Louis Blues are, considering their lackluster start. And then even Joel Hofer, the backup, has an .890 save percentage. So regardless between the two, hasn't been very good this season. So the Blackhawks cannot be too passive in the offensive zone and only register like 20 to 23 shots in this game. I think if they get 30 and test the Blues netminders legitimately, good chance that they're going to come away with a victory. My number 2 key to victory is to keep using that speed. I really thought it was a difference maker, and the Rangers had a tough time managing it in that game on Tuesday. And not only is St. Louis 31st in the NHL in goals against, but they're also 30th in the NHL in goals for. They're bad in both categories. So I don't think they'll be able to keep up with the Blackhawks' speed offensively. And I think if the Hawks can use their wheels effectively and, get 3 or more goals tonight, they're going to come away with another 2 points at Enterprise Center. And then my third and final key for the Blackhawks is to not let tired legs off of the hook. We've seen the Blackhawks a couple of times this year when they're facing a team who's on the back end of a back-to-back, go and get off to awesome starts in the first period, only to let them off the hook and allow the opponent to get right back into the game in the middle frame. Do not let that happen to the Blues here tonight. Divisional games are so big. You want to kick a team while they're down. Go and take it to St. Louis early. Hawks have been really good in the first period this season, but keep your foot on the pedal all the way through, just like you did against the Rangers, and let's go and make it 2 real solid team victories in a row here going into the back end of this back-to-back. All right, there is my preview of tonight's matchup out in St. Louis against the Blues, 7 p.m. Central Time on ESPN+. Coming up in just a moment, Hawks fans, it's time for part 2 of Deep Dive 3.0, where I'll go through some Blackhawks team stats and analytics, as well as the same with all of the defensemen. But first, I got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, and one big play can suddenly make everything feel different. But that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets right as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift. When a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips immediately after a turnover. FanDuel lets you go and jump right into the moment so that you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of all the action this season, go and visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Per usual, before I get into segment 2, just a quick reminder, if you like what you're watching here today and aren't already subscribed to the channel, please make sure to go and do that for me. It's 100% free, will not cost you anything, and will help me reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers before 2025 comes to a close. Segment 2 here on today's show, it's time for part 2 of Deep Dive 3.0, where I'll go through the stats and analytics for every Blackhawks defenseman, as well as some team stats here for the 25-26 campaign real quick. Starting with the Blackhawks, team Corsi for percentage. And as I broke down on yesterday's show, for anyone who doesn't know what Corsi for is, it's shot attempts against versus shot attempts, shot attempts for versus shot attempts against at even strength. Ideally, you'd like to be on the right side of the 50% Mendoza line. The Blackhawks are at 46.16% as a team. Majority of their forwards below 46% when I broke it down on yesterday's episode. I want to say like Oliver Moore, Ryan Donato, only a couple players were up around 47% as a whole. And as a team, that ranks 29th out of 32 clubs. The Blackhawks have rifled 1,268 shot attempts through their opening 30 games at even strength, while they've given up 1,479. So largely, the opposing team is still getting more shot attempts, and the Blackhawks are defending a little bit more in general at even strength this season. However, as far as the goals for goes, the Blackhawks have 61 goals for at even strength compared to only 66 against, which is 21st in the NHL, giving them 48.03 goals for percentage. So despite the opponent getting more shot attempts regularly than they do, the Blackhawks are pretty even at getting the finished product, which, tells you I think they're a pretty opportunistic bunch. And when I broke down a lot of the forward shooting percentage yesterday, I don't think that should be a surprise. And that's why I say the Blackhawks need to be shooting the puck more in the offensive zone. Next, we get to expected goals for, and this is where the Blackhawks kind of struggle. 29th in team Corsi for percentage. They're 31st out of 32 teams in expected goals for, and that's largely because they are getting outchanced. The opponent is getting more high danger chances. They're getting more shot attempts, but the Blackhawks are still keeping up at getting the finished product. And in general, in scoring chances, like I just mentioned, also 31st in the NHL, as they've generated 230 at even strength and given up 316 at 5-on-5 as well. So what do those stats tell us about the Blackhawks through 30 contests? Well, they're a very opportunistic bunch, like I just said. And I think a lot of that is Connor Bedard being a very dangerous player, because obviously these numbers don't weigh how dangerous those opportunities opposing teams or the Blackhawks generate. But when Connor Bedard gets dangerous opportunities, he's putting them in the back of the net or making a play to set up one of his teammates very often. And I think, when you look at the shooting percentage for the rest of the Blackhawks, not shooting the puck frequently, but when they get quality opportunities, they're doing a pretty good job at cashing in on them. Another part of that and how the Blackhawks are in a playoff spot, despite some of these analytics, is undoubtedly their goaltending. Spencer Knight has been awesome. And while the Blackhawks have lost more close contests in these last couple of weeks, that was something they were really good at earlier on in the season, winning a lot of those close contests and finding ways to score key goals in the third period while also getting stellar goaltending. Knight has been a huge reason why the Blackhawks have been so competitive this season. He's been a big reason why they've won a lot of games, hence him being in the Vezina Trophy conversation. And like I broke down a couple of days ago, is right there, seemingly battling with Jeremy Swayman for the third goaltender on Team USA's roster. And I think another big part of how the Blackhawks have been successful, despite some of these underlying analytics and why people are, have been expecting a little bit of a dip, maybe why this recent stretch the last 3 weeks isn't all that surprising. Well, they have been getting great special teams, both on the great special teams play, both on the power play and the penalty kill. The Blackhawks have been really good at cashing in on the man advantage. Tyler Bertuzzi and Connor Bedard have been their two biggest difference makers there, and you want to see your best offensive players contribute when you have a man advantage. And then the penalty kill has been a real big strength for the Blackhawks through their opening 30 contest, one of the best in the entire league. They have so many great penalty killers, whether it be Jason Dickinson, Ilya Mikheyev, Teuvo Teravainen, Frankie Nazar and his wheels, right? So getting real good special teams play has also helped the Blackhawks win a lot of these close games or nights where they've been getting outshot and maybe the analytics don't look great. They're winning the special teams battle to help them pick up 2 points or at least get into overtime and pick up 1 point to help them out in the standings. So that's kind of what the team stats tell us a little bit through these opening 30 games. Time to get into each and every member of the Blackhawks defensemen through the first 30 contests this year, starting in order of points produced. So that means Artem Levshinov, the 2024 number 2 overall pick, is the first one to be getting a breakdown. He's played in 29 of the Blackhawks opening 30 games. Had that healthy scratching in the home opener against the Montreal Canadiens and has responded really well for the most part ever since. In his 29 games, he's got 1 goal, finally got that first NHL tuck against the Minnesota Wild, and he's chipped in for 13 assists, which leads all Blackhawks defensemen and in general is third on the team, and that gives him 14 points, which is currently 6th on the roster as well. -4 plus-minus rating for Artem Levshinov defensively, as I'll kind of get into a little bit more here, is still a work in progress. 20 penalty minutes in 29 games for Levshinov. Thought, staying out of the penalty box was more so a problem for him in the first couple weeks of the season. Think he's done a pretty solid job overall of cleaning that up recently. 8 power play points for Artie. He's been nicely productive quarterbacking the top power play unit ever since he replaced Sam Renzel, which was the right decision by Jeff Blashill. Hasn't maybe been like the primary driver of play, as I think a large amount of his power play points and assists in general have been secondary helpers this year. However, I think he's undoubtedly the best Blackhawks defenseman already at perusing the offensive zone, setting, pick plays and just recognizing how plays are being developed out there. He is involving himself in helping the Blackhawks score those goals, even if he's not generating the final tally or picking up the primary assist. But I do think he's been a good puck mover as the defenseman on the top power play unit. 37 shots on goal for Artie. I feel like he's picked this up in recent weeks. I do like him having more of a shoot first mentality from the blue line, only shooting 2.7% though, which I do feel like is going to go up. He's got a pretty good shot from the blue line and has been getting a lot of good chances that goaltenders have been just barely getting a piece of, averaging 16 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice. His role has been expanded, especially since Renzel was moved down from the top D pairing. And then Levshinov's chipped in for 28 blocks along with 27 hits. Been willing to, dish out the body a little bit, which I like to see for a player of his size at a young age, and has been a willing shot blocker as well. And then getting into the analytics for Levshinov, some of the better analytics of any Blackhawks defenseman. 47.9 Corsi for percentage. Good stuff there. Mentioned earlier, the Blackhawks team percentage on average is 46.16%. So he's above that. He's been on the ice for 18 goals for to 18 goals against, 18 goals for at even strength in 29 games, I think is pretty darn good. However, it's probably too many goals against, considering that 71.1% of his faceoffs come in the offensive zone. He's still getting sheltered by Jeff Blashill, which, probably won't happen as much now that there's only 6 defensemen on the roster. But considering how the pairings are right now, he and Grzelcyk, the 2 offensive defensemen, while Kaiser is with Murphy, Vlasic is with Crevier, both those guys, all 4 of those guys, I should say, more so known for their defensive play and get a lot of starts in the defensive zone. So even though there's only 6, if Levshinov's going to still be playing with Grzelcyk, I think that's how Blashill's going to continue to use him. And his expected goals for percentage, 44.9 XGF. And has been on the ice for 157 scoring chances for to 173 scoring chances against. So a fine dispersion there. However, like I said, it's probably too many scoring chances to give up and probably too many goals against, considering, 7 out of every 10 zone starts that he takes comes in the offensive zone. And I know a decent amount of his shifts come on the fly as well, where he's got to do some offensive work and do some defending in his own zone. But I still think, there's definitely room for growth for Levshunov defensively, but that's something that's just going to take time. He's still only 20 years old, came immediately out of the NHL draft into the professional level. So it's just, we got to be a little patient with Artie defensively, but offensively, he already knows how to maneuver around the offensive zone and has been the most impactful offensive defenseman on the Blackhawks so far this year. Next, we get into Louis Crevier, who is second among all Blackhawks defensemen with 11 points this year, first with 3 goals, one of just 2 defensemen with multiple goals on the season. Also has chipped in with 8 assists, which is second among all Blackhawks defensemen as well. +7 plus-minus rating for Louis Crevier, which is really impressive when you go through these analytics, which I'll get to in just a second. 35 penalty minutes for Crevier. Think there have been times where he needs to make some smarter decisions, but altogether, one of those has come from fighting, and he is someone that plays a lot defensively, so it's hard to kind of get on him still as a young defenseman. And all 11 of his points that he scored this year have come from the even strength variety. So Artem Levshunov, 8 of his 14 points have come on the power play. That gives him 6 primary points on the season. Louis Crevier has 11 even strength points for the Blackhawks. I mean, super impressive stuff there for Big Lou. 39 shots on goal as well, more than Artem Levshunov has recorded. Is that the most among Blackhawks defensemen? 39. I think it's tied with Sam Rinzel, who's now in Rockford, of course, for the most among Blackhawks defensemen, despite only averaging 14 minutes and 17 seconds of time on ice and having 73.9% of his starts come in the defensive zone. I really cannot speak highly enough about Louis Crevier, someone who, coming into this year, I really didn't think had a chance to be a puzzle piece here in Chicago, but he's proven me wrong and has been really solid on both ends of the ice so far this year. 21 block shots, 40 hits, really good stuff from Louis Crevier. Next, we get to Sam Rinzel, who, even though I know is in Rockford right now, do still want to go through his stats and analytics. Played in 28 of the Blackhawks opening 30 games, 1 goal, 7 assists for 8 points. It's third among all Blackhawks defensemen, +0 plus-minus rating with 28 penalty minutes. Did think he kind of struggled a bit, especially as someone who plays more in offensive situations with staying out of the sin bin. Also had no power play points while quarterbacking the top power play unit to open up the season. Definitely impacted the decision to him being not only demoted from the top pairing, but being reassigned to Rockford. 39 shots on goal along with Louis Crevier. Did feel like Sam Rinzel did a good job getting the puck on net, just wasn't able to get the finished product too frequently, just like Artem Levshunov shooting 2.6%. Averaging 16 minutes and 32 seconds of time on ice. His role dipped massively after playing over 20 minutes, I want to say, in 4 or 5 of the opening 9 contests. Did chip in for 29 block shots, added 26 hits as well, which I like to see out of Rinzel, using his size, even though I don't expect him ever to be a physical defenseman in his own zone, willing to at least throw the body around at times, and then getting into the analytics for him. 46.1 Corsi for percentage, pretty solid for this Blackhawks squad. Been on the ice for 20 goals for to 20 goals against. 44.5 expected goals for percentage, though. And that's because he was on the ice for 163 scoring chances for to 210 against at even strength. Probably too many scoring chances given up and probably too many goals against, similarly to Artem Levshunov, for a guy who had 62.2% of his zone starts coming in the offensive zone. That's, probably why there was a pretty good Corsi for percentage for Sam Rinzel, but not as great of an expected goals for percentage there. So definitely has to kind of shore up his defense a little bit and get his swagger and confidence back with the puck on his stick during his time in the AHL with Rockford. All right, Blackhawks fans, going to take a quick break, but when I return, I'll get into the stats and analytics for the rest of the blue line. But first, got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors here on Locked On Blackhawks, which is Monarch. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. With travel, gifts, parties, and year-end expenses, it's real easy to lose track of your money this time of the year. And that's exactly why Monarch has been such a game changer for me. If you want to go and get your finances under control this holiday season, then you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple dashboard, both available on your phone and your laptop. In just minutes, you can check your net worth, link all of your accounts, and keep track of contributions before deadlines arrive. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps at monarch.com in your browser, and you'll also get half off on your first year. Again, that's 50% off on your first year at monarch.com when you use our promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps. Segment 3, picking up where I left off. The next defenseman to get into is none other than number 72, Alex Vlasic, who's played in 29 of the opening 30 games, missed the season opener due to an injury, but has been in the lineup every night ever since then. And he's tallied 2 goals and 3 assists for just 5 points, which is a little disappointing, although similarly to Ryan Donato, but obviously as a defenseman, Vlasic wasn't going to be having nearly the same role that he played last year for the Hawks when he was getting time on the second power play unit, even on the top power play unit after Seth Jones was traded and before Sam Rinzel arrived. So knew it was going to be hard to replicate the 30 points, I believe, that Vlasic put up last year. However, I have been, don't want to talk too harshly on him, but I have been a little disappointed by Alex Vlasic's games so far this year. -7 plus-minus rating, which I know does come with the territory with the ice time and playing so often defensively. But still, I don't feel like he's been as consistently fluid in the defensive zone as we've seen from him in the past couple of years. Only 5 penalty minutes, though, which I'll give him credit for, aside from a 5-minute fighting major against the Calgary Flames, where I believe it was Mackenzie Weegar that he dropped the glove with. Vlasic hasn't taken a single penalty this year, which is incredible for a guy who plays on the penalty kill, plays in defensive situations, first on the team in ice time. Like, that's really good stuff there out of number 72. No power play points this year for Alex Vlasic. Doesn't even play on the second power play unit any longer. 28 shots on goal in 29 games played. That's something I continue to talk about that he needs to work on. And he's shooting 7.1%, has 2 goals with those 28 shots. And I know most of his action comes in the D zone, but I do still feel like as someone who uses his wheels and play recognition pretty well on the cycle offensively, doesn't shoot the biscuit too often. 21 minutes and 14 seconds of time on ice. I mentioned that leads all Blackhawks skaters. 51 block shots, leads the team in that category as well. Chipped in with 15 hits. Never going to be a strong suit of Vlasic's game despite his size, but I would like to see him use it a little bit more like Levshinov and like Sam Rinzel. I got the hiccups all of a sudden. Neither of those three are ever going to be overtly physical players, but when you have that size, you got to know how to use it, especially when this team is going to get to Stanley Cup playoff time and the physicality only wraps up. 44.6 Corsi for percentage for Vlasic, which I think for the role that he does play is pretty decent. Been on the ice for 16 goals for to 25 goals against. Probably a couple too many there. 40.6 expected goals for percentage. Not very good at all, but again, not that surprising for someone who plays so often in the D zone and for someone who does the 194 scoring chances for to 238 scoring chances against when Vlasic has been on the ice honestly isn't as big of a dispersion as I expected for a player who gets 72.6% of his zone starts in the D zone. Next, that takes us to Matt Grzelcyk, who's played in all 30 of the Blackhawks games after signing a contract with the team after being on a PTO to enter training camp. No goals, though, still for Grzelcyk. 5 assists. Hasn't been too involved offensively. However, has been on the right side of the plus-minus ledger more times than not. +7 plus-minus rating. Only 14 penalty minutes. Kind of like Levshinov, had a problem taking penalties early, but has cleaned that up in the past month or so. 4 of his 5 points have come from the even strength variety. He has 1 shorthanded assist, which came on Tuesday's game. Now getting time on the second power play unit. Would like to see him after being one of the most productive power play defensemen in the league last year. Would like to see him help that unit out a little bit more. 32 shots on goal for Grzelcyk as well in 30 games played, considering he doesn't play all that frequently, even if it does mostly come in the offensive zone. I've been pretty happy with averaging 15 minutes and 50 seconds of time on ice, chipped in for 26 blocks, which you like to see, 13 hits. I mean, he's like 5'10", 5'11", and nearly has as many hits as Alex Vlasic. That's kind of the stuff that I'm talking about there. But Grzelcyk is the best analytical player on the Blackhawks so far this year. 49.6 Corsi for percentage, been on the ice for 24 goals for to only 18 against in 30 games played. Real good stuff there from Grzelcyk, as well as a 48.7 expected goals for percentage, and he's been on the ice for 192 scoring chances for to 214 against. And while Levshinov, his offensive zone start percentage is up in the 70s, Rinzel's up in the 60s, Matt Grzelcyk's is only 58.6. So while he still does play predominantly in offensive situations, is not as much as those other two youngsters that I just mentioned, and he's been the better defender between the two. Only 18 goals for at even strength that Grzelcyk has been on the ice for this year. Been on the ice for 24 goals for, +7 +- rating. Even if he's not like a key contributor, still is doing well in those situations and helping his team out in the O zone. Then we get to Wyatt Kaiser. He's played in all 30 games. Only one goal, which came on Saturday against came on Thursday against the Los Angeles Kings in the front end of that quick 2-game series out west. A little disappointed that he hasn't chipped in more offensively. Only 4 points as well. 4 assists as well, giving him 5 points. That's tied with Alex Vlasic and Matt Grzelcyk. Definitely did not think that would be the case through the opening 30 games when entering the season. But Kaiser has been an effective player for the Blackhawks. I don't mean to talk down on him because he's been really good on both sides, but I do feel like defensively hasn't been as great the last 2 weeks as it was in the earlier portion of the season, leading to he and Artem Levshinov being split up. But Kaiser still has a +2 ± rating, is only taken 16 penalty minutes, which is really good stuff. Doesn't play on the power play, which I understand when you have Matt Grzelcyk and you have Vlasic, and when Rinzel was up in the NHL at the same time, those guys are going to get the priority over Kaiser. So that definitely, is a part of his offensive numbers not being maybe as high, even though he wasn't getting power play time last year, or really hasn't in general since being at the pro scene. Definitely still think there's more that he can offer offensively. 28 shots on goal. That's another category where I think he can be chipping in a little bit more. 3.6 shooting percentage on the year, averaging 19 minutes and 16 seconds of time on ice. And while he does play more so in defensive situations, 59.7% of his zone starts come in the D zone. He's still playing a decent amount in the opposing end. So would like to see him shoot the puck a little bit more and be more of a contributor offensively. Chipped in with 28 block shots, though, does have 20 hits. Just a kind of guy a jack of all trades type of guy that can give you a little bit of everything. And then getting into Kaiser's analytics, 44.9 Corsi for percentage. Ho-hum, would like that to be a little bit better for his capabilities. 21 goals for to 21 goals against, 43.3 expected goals for percentage, and has been on the ice for 183 scoring chances for to 238 scoring chances against. So while he has been good defensively, I do still think Kaiser can be a little bit better. But again, not too surprising his stats are where they are, considering 60% of his zone starts come in the D zone. And then last but certainly not least, we get to the veteran, Connor Murphy. Played in all 30 games played, only has 3 points on the season, no goals, 3 assists, really doesn't offer much offensively at this point of his career. Only has a -5 ± rating, though, which quite honestly, for his role, I'm fairly happy with. 21 penalty minutes, too. Hasn't gone to the box too much, I feel like, this season. 27 shots on goal as well for Murphy in 30 games played. I mean, the fact that he's right there with Alex Vlasic, right there with, Artem Levshinov. That's why, I keep saying on these deep dives that those guys got to shoot the puck more. Because Murphy has 27 in 30 games while only averaging 15 minutes of time on ice per game, and 82.4% of his zone starts, most of any Blackhawks defenseman, come in the defensive zone. Hence his 40 blocks, which is second on the team. Chipped in for 26 hits as well. And honestly, given how much he plays in the D zone, his analytics aren't too poor. 44.6 Corsi for percentage, which is right there with Wyatt Kaiser. Only been on the ice for 8 goals for, doesn't give you much offensively, doesn't play a lot in the offensive zone, but he's only been on the ice for 13 even strength goals against in 30 games. I know it's a minimal role on the third pairing. That's pretty darn good from Connor Murphy. 44.9 expected goals for percentage, better than Wyatt Kaiser, which is a little surprising. He's been on the ice for 124 scoring chances for to 155 scoring chances against, which I think is a pretty fine dispersion considering, again, how much he plays in the defensive zone. All right, that is going to take care of Deep Dive 3.0 in today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. If you stayed with me all the way up until the very end, thank you all very much. You're a real trooper. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. So that way, you can get the latest episodes whenever they become available, whether you're on your way to work, driving back home from work, on your lunch break, whatever it may be. If you want to check me out on social media, you can find me at Jack Bushman 2 for my personal account. My Strictly Blackhawks account can be found at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, yes, we'll be having a show dropping tomorrow, recapping this game against the Blues and previewing the back end of the back-to-back on Saturday night against the Detroit Red Wings. Until then, everyone stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your Fridays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.